The UFC 205, the history New York debut. Introduction. Introduction. UFC 205 held on November 12, 2016 in Madison Square Garden in New York City was a landmark event in the history of mixed artisan marts. This event marked the first time that UFC held in card in New York following the legalization of MMA in the state early that year. UFC 205 was headlined by a highly anticipated bout between Conor McGregor and Eddie Alvarez for the UFC Lightweight Championship. The event was historic not only for this venue, but also for the significant achievements and performance that took place at night. The significance of Madison Square Garden. The Madison Square Garden, often referred to as the Mecca of boxing, has a rich history of hosting iconic combat sport events. For decades, it was a premier venue for boxing matches featuring legends like Muhammad Ali, George Fraser, and Mike Tyson. Bringing the UFC to this historic arena was a monumental step for the sport of MMA, symbolizing its growing acceptance and legitimacy in the world of sport. The main event, McGregor versus Alvarez. The main event featured McGregor, the UFC heavyweight champion, challenging Eddie Alvarez for the UFC lightweight title. This fight was significant as McGregor aimed to become the first fight in UFC history to hold titles in two different weight classes simultaneously. From the moment the fight began, McGregor showcased his striking prowess. He displayed superior footwork, timing, and precision, landing clean shots on Alvarez. In the first round, McGregor dropped Alvarez multiple times with his powerful left hand. Alvarez struggled to find his rhythm and deal with McGregor's speed and accuracy. In the second round, McGregor continued his dominance, ultimately finished Alvarez with a combination that led to a TKO victory. With this win, McGregor made history as the first dual vision champion in the UFC history, solidifying his legacy as one of the greatest fighters in the sport. Notable fight and performance. UFC 205 featured a striker card with several notable fights and performance. Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson. This bout for the welterweight title was an intense, back and forth battle. Woodley, the reigning champion, facing the striking specialist Thompson. The fight ended in a majority draw, with Woodley retaining his title. The bout was praised for its high level of skill and competitiveness. Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. This fight for the women's strawweight title was a showcase of technical striking. Jędrzejczyk defended her title with a unanimous decision victory over Kowalkiewicz, demonstrating her dominance in the division. Joel Romero versus Chris Weidman. Romero and Weidman faced off in a middleweight bout with a title implication. Romero delivered a spectacular flying knee in the third round, knockout Weidman and earning a title shot against the middleweight champions. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Michael Johnson. Khabib showcased his grappling superiority by dominating Johnson. He won the fight via submission in the third round, solidifying his position as a top contender in the flyweight division. The impact of UFC 205. The UFC 205 was a landmark event that demonstrated the growing popularity and acceptance of MMA. The event set a new record for the highest gate in Madison Square Garden history, generating over $17 million in ticket sales. It also achieved one of the highest pay-per-view buy rates in UFC history, with over 1.0 million buys. The success of UFC 205 paved the way for future events in the New York and other major markets. It showcased the UFC ability to put on high-caliber events in iconic venues, further solidifying the sport's place in mainstream sports culture. Legacy. The legacy of UFC 205 is defined by its historic achievement and memorable performance. Conor McGregor's dual title victory remains one of the most significant accomplishments in MMA history. The event also highlighted the depth of talent in the UFC, with multiple champions and top contenders delivering standout performance. UFC 205 is remembered as a milestone event that elevated the sport to a new heights. It demonstrated the UFC capacity to deliver unforgettable moments and cement in place as premium sport organization. Question and answer. What was the significance of UFC 205 being held at Madison Square Garden? UFC 205 was significant because it marked the first time in the UFC held an event at Madison Square Garden, a venue with the rich history of hosting iconic combat sport events. This event symbolized the growing acceptance and legitimacy of MMA in a mainstream sport. It also represents a major step forward for the UFC following the legalization of MMA in New York early that year. 2. How did Conor McGregor make history at UFC 205? Conor McGregor made history at UFC 205 by becoming the first fight in UFC history to hold titles in two different weight classes simultaneously. He achieved this feat by defending Eddie Alvarez for the UFC lightweight championship while already holding the UFC weight title. McGregor's dominant performance and TKO victory in the second round cemented his legacy as one of the greatest fighters in the sport. 3. What were some notable fights and performances at UFC 205? UFC 205 featured several notable fights and performances. Tyron Woodley and Steph Thompson. This welterweight title fight ended in a majority draw, with Woodley retaining his title. Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Jędrzejczyk defended his women's strawweight title with an unanimous decision victory. Joel Romero versus Chris Weidman. Romero won with a spectacular flying knee knockout in the third round. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Michael Johnson. Khabib dominated and won via submission in the third round. What impact did UFC 2005 have on the popularity of MMA? UFC 205 had a significant impact on the popularity of MMA. It set a new record for the highest gate in Madison Square Garden. History and achievement, one of the highest pay-per-view by ratings in UFC history. The success of the event demonstrated the UFC ability to put on fight caliber events in iconic venues, further solidifying MMA place in mainstream sport culture. The event also paved the way for future UFC events and major makers. How is UFC 105 remembered in the history of UFC? The UFC 205 is remembered as a milestone event in the history of the UFC. It is defined by its history achievement, including McGregor dual title victory and memorable performance from the top fighters. The event elevated the sport to a new heights and demonstrated the UFC capacity to deliver unforgettable moments. UFC 205 solidified the UFC's place and premier sport organization and left a lasting legacy in the world of MMA.